All right, welcome everybody. Today is December 11th, and we are here to discuss the compliance rulemaking for the uh, Energy Facility Siting Council. And I really appreciate all of your attendance today. I do not anticipate this meeting lasting that long, but we shall see. I scheduled it for 90 minutes. I've had them go, longer than I thought, but they typically go shorter than I schedule. So I've been shrinking my scheduled rack times as time goes on, just so people don't have to block out such a huge part of your schedule. Anyway, so this is just the first rack, just kind of gonna go over the scope of what we're here, to do, and also get people to introduce themselves, which is always fun in a remote meeting where no one knows who to go next. But I'm actually just gonna read off your name in the list, and then you can go ahead and just introduce yourself. And if you're representing an organization, say that. If you're not, and you're just here as a member of the public, go ahead and say that. But let's go ahead and get started here. And you are at the top of the list in alphabetical order here.
Okay. Ann Byer, I'm on the Energy Facility Siting Council and tracking this particular rulemaking. And prior to that, I'd been the Community Development Director at Crook County.
Awesome, thanks. And we greatly appreciate your attendance here. I haven't had too many council members at prior racks, so this will be a good experience for me. Hopefully it is for you as well.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for involving me.
All right, Andrew Bauer, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Andrew Bauer. I go by Andy most of the time, unless I'm in trouble, which Sarah knows about. But I'm the Environmental Compliance Manager at Northwest Natural and also a site certificate holder.
All right. Marie Dugan? I mispronounced your name, my apologies.
No worries. Dugan Marab. I'm here representing Pine Gate Renewables as well as OSEA, mainly OSEA. Separate from Pine Gate, I am an OSEA board member. So that's an Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association. We represent several solar and storage companies in the state that interact with EFSC all the time. And I am also a certificate holder. So, we have experience with ODO and EFSC here. Looking forward to it.
All right. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Esterson. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor in the Siting Division.
Awesome. Ryan?
Ryan Hill, I'm here representing NextEra Energy Resources. We're also a certificate holder for a couple of sites.
All right, Lena? Or Lena? I actually don't know how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, it's Lena Cope. I'm with Portland General Electric, and I'm a senior environmental specialist, and we hold several site certificates.
All right. Martha?
Yes, I'm a former EFSC member. I retired in 2010, and I'm an interested party. I participated in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission Energy Policy Act rulemaking in DC.
All right. Patrick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Patrick Rowe, Oregon Department of Justice. I am General Counsel to the Department of Energy, as well as EFSC.
Okay, and then Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Sarah Buckwalter, and I'm also with Portland General Electric. And I'm a government affairs manager. Sorry.
No worries. And for those of you who don't know, I am Tom Jackman, and I have been the rules coordinator for the Energy Facility Siting Council for almost exactly, a little over 3 years now. So
Wow.
I can't say that I don't know what I'm doing, but it does feel like it's gone by in a nanosecond. So there's always more to learn. All right, so just going to briefly go over the rulemaking process, and then we'll get into it. So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's pretty standard, I would say, sort of government agency process. We've already initiated the rulemaking earlier this year. We're currently in the development of the draft proposed rules portion. Once we develop some draft proposed rules that we're satisfied with, we will then present those rules to the council, and if they are happy with them, they would then initiate the notice of proposed rulemaking, which would start the formal public comment period, where if you wanted to, you could make additional comments. So your participation doesn't necessarily have to end with the end of the RAC. You can just comment as a member of the public, at which point we would then take the feedback from that comment period and present those to council for potential adoption of permanent rules. Although depending on the comment period, we could potentially make significant changes that require a new notice, which doesn't happen much, but it does happen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the compliance rules that we're here to discuss. I think it's important to start with the statutory authority because the agency created some rules, and the council created some rules to implement this statutory authority. And as we think about, what should the rules look like? Should we change them? Should we get rid of some rules? Should we add a rule? I always like to think it has to be tied to the statute. We cannot act outside of our statutory authority. So the compliance program that the council runs is under direct direction of the legislature when they passed this statute in 469-401, which directs the council to create site certificates with conditions that are designed to protect the public health and safety, lay out the schedule for the completion of construction, and to ensure compliance with all the standards and statutes and rules as laid out in the statute. So this is not an optional program. The council does not run a compliance program for fun or because they feel like it's important. We do it because we have to, because the legislature has directed us to do that. So when we think about, adding or subtracting rule language or modifying rule language, I think about it with this direction in mind. Does it serve this function? If it does, then our hands are sort of tied. Not to say that we can't come up with maybe better ways to implement the rule language, but it always comes back to this. And then sort of as a corollary in 469-430, it specifically lays out that once a site certificate is granted, the council's authority is not over that project does not cease. It continues, and they're specifically granted the authority to inspect sites and facilities and to periodically review documents, reports, and other materials to ensure that the facility continues to comply with all terms and conditions. So the scope of this rulemaking is going to be the Division 26 in OER 345, which is where the current compliance rules are located. It's possible that we might come with a sort of related rule outside of Division 26 that's connected to the compliance rules. Sometimes that comes up where we realize maybe a reference is made to one of these rules in another rule, and that needs to change too because we made a change here. But really, the focus of this rulemaking is going to be on Division 26, and that's where you should spend most of your time if when you're thinking about what we want to improve. And any questions about the scope of the rulemaking or what we're here to do? I'm going to talk a little bit more about some potential subject areas in a minute, but no, okay.
I can jump in quickly. Just a
yeah,
question.
sure.
So, what, to your understanding, what rules govern pre-construction compliance? Just in, I don't know, maybe that is just a part of the normal process that isn't really written in rule, or does it come from Division 26 or from this section specifically? Just curious what that part of the construction application following through on the site certificate process, what of division or of this OAR that relates to.
Yeah, individual 26. Sarah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it's the 0048.
Okay, the
Is where-
compliance, the
Mhm,
compliance plans. Okay,
mhm.
understood.
And there's not much.
Right. That's what I was noticing. So maybe that's something I will bring up.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. So one of the, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. I don't want to get too far ahead, but yeah, that is actually one of the things that we want to improve is the pre-construction sort of rule language that directs that. Any other questions about the compliance rules?
Yeah, I have just a question.
Sure.
The standard for radiation control or for the radiation standards are based on 500 milligrams a year. Is that going to change? Is that going to be discussed? Especially having to do with 34550 in some of the rules that are involved in the nuclear site certificates.
So that would be under
ways.
I feel like we had a Division 50 rulemaking 2 years ago. I don't anticipate us modifying any of that stuff to the extent where we would change specific thresholds. And that's definitely stuff that's come up. We did one with respect to landfill storage. We updated some language I think 2 years ago with the rulemaking on that, but that's probably outside the scope of this rulemaking. So
are you going to change the pathway exemption?
yeah, I don't see
pathway
that coming up
exemption
here.
is in 50 as well, but it all is associated with this. And actually, when I was on the siting council, I was the one that was in charge of the EFSC.
The EFSC decommissioning.
Yeah.
If there's something in rule 350 or 370 or 390 that that you feel should be modified or changed, that's absolutely within the scope of this rulemaking. And Sam just joined, which is great. I'm going to make you introduce yourself in a second, Sam, but we were just going through the scope of the rulemaking here, which is anything in Division 26. So if there's something in 370 or 390 you feel needs to be updated, yeah, it's within the scope of this rulemaking. All right. So going to turn this over to Sarah, who has a lot more experience with the actual operations of the compliance program, just to kind of give you guys a brief overview of how it works, if you aren't already familiar.
Yeah, so again, my name is Sarah Esterson. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor in the Siting Division. Just wanted to give you an overview of the compliance program. So the certificate holders in the room already know this, but for the others, we're a fee-based division, and for the most part, and compliance applies once a site certificate has been issued by the Energy Facility Siting Council. And so then we're working with certificate holders who then are statutorily obligated to pay a fee for service. So we assess compliance fees, whether it be for one of three phases. Those phases are pre-construction, construction, and operation. So once you have a site certificate, you get assessed for fees on an annual basis based on your forecasted phase. We get those fees and then we implement compliance oversight for these kind of, again, three phases. Pre-construction, before they've started, they have a set of conditions that we have to evaluate and ensure that they comply with. Those conditions can include, mitigation plans that are critical to offset impacts. And then we move through construction, evaluating actual impacts as they happen. And then operations, we're evaluating whether they're complying with their operation and maintenance conditions. And we do that in various ways. And just so you know, we now have 3 full-time compliance officers They largely help do the oversight of operational facilities. We have about 28 operational facilities. We are still working with a consultant in large part to help with pre-construction compliance support and construction compliance support, as that is just an additional level of work that, kind of is not continuous. So we don't necessarily have resources all the time to provide for that. But yeah, so all in all, when we have our full-time with consultants, we have about 7 people working on compliance at all times. So that's our program.
All right. And just as somebody who is, works at the department, for a long time, we had one department staff member who was running compliance, and it was a lot for him to do.
The whole thing.
And we have recently, he departed, but we've recently hired several new folks. So we have, from an FTE standpoint internally, we have significantly more resources to, I don't want to say throw at the compliance problem, but dedicated staff
support the program,
who are going to hopefully be able to take advantage of the improvements that we will be implementing based on sort of lessons learned. So I'm going to turn to this preliminary issue slide that I made. And we've gone through the rules ourselves just to sort of identify any, call them hot spots or hot issues or kind of standout things that we definitely want to address. But I just want to emphasize it's not exhaustive or the whole thing, although there's some pretty broad stuff in here that I would say covers most of everything. But just to kind of give you an idea of where our minds are at, I'm just going to run through this a little bit. But these are some things we wanted to look at as we go through these. Number one is there's sprinkled throughout the compliance rules is language in there that kind of directs the department or the council to have oversight or sort of check on facilities to make sure that they're complying with federal requirements and other provisions that are sort of outside the scope of council authority, that are not their responsibility. And so we want to confirm that's the case. And then if that is indeed the case, remove that language from the rules because, there are other agencies or areas of our regulatory oversight that are responsible for that. And we don't want to have sort of overlap where somebody has to report to 2 different people on the same issue, especially when it's outside the scope. So that's a significant one. And then I have several of these clarifying bullet points, and these are all sort of, you can put them under one big umbrella, but going through the compliance rules and really, any regulatory structure, there's always more you can do to clarify, especially as things change, as things evolve, technology evolves, the way, best practices evolve, and there's always opportunities to examine each piece of the puzzle and each piece of the process and ask yourself, is the rule adequately describing what is expected of each of the parties involved? And that's the site certificate holder, that's the compliance officers in the department, that's the council. Are their responsibilities outlined as clearly as they can be? Are there things that are vague? And so to kind of go through some of these, a big one would be clarifying how compliance is shown by the certificate holder. So describing their responsibilities in terms of showing that they are actually in compliance. Are there things that we're asking the certificate holder to do that we don't need to be asking them to do? Are there things that we should be asking them to do that would help make the compliance officers' lives easier or the program operate more efficiently? Those are questions that we're going to be thinking about, and I'm looking to the RAC as well to think about. We're hoping to clarify the requirements on staff and the departments for how we monitor compliance and how we communicate that monitoring with the certificate holder. So to the extent it's vague or unclear or maybe not in there at all, to insert language to that effect. And to Dugan's point, we want to clarify the pre-construction process, including how the department is notified by the certificate holder about construction start, in that process. There's some sort of limited rules in there, and they're due for some tweaking and maybe some additional rule language to kind of beef that section up. And we want to go through the process about sort of the regulation on construction and operation for what happens if a violation is determined. So making it clear what the authority the council has in those circumstances, and basically what happens and how it happens. And then this, touching back on what I started with, and the theme of all, I think, any good rulemaking is we want to look through all the rules in Division 26, and if something is in there that doesn't seem to be serving a function, or it serves a function, but that function is not relevant to the compliance program or outside the scope of the statutory direction, or just maybe it would serve the purpose at one point but doesn't seem to anymore, or perhaps it's been made redundant by another agency or other rule language, then we want to yoink it out there. So I always try to trim the fat, as it were, and make it so that things are as streamlined and purpose-driven as we possibly can make it. So that's a pretty quick and broad overview of the scope of how I see the scope of this rulemaking. But again, if it's in Division 26 and you have ideas and it's outside of this list here, definitely bring it up. And to the extent you can think of your proposed solution, that's even better. To the extent that that solution includes actual rule language, even better. But if you can't think of those things, and you just sort of spot an issue like this doesn't make sense, you don't know how you'd solve it or what language you'd propose, that's fine too. So what my goal is between now and the next meeting is that you will maybe review the rules in Division 26. It's not too long. The more relevant ones are sort of at the top half. The more esoteric, kind of like the nuclear safety stuff, is in the latter half. I'm suspecting most of you won't need to focus too much on those, but to kind of go through those rules with these preliminary issues in mind, because we are going to be addressing them, so you can start to think about them as now, but also to see if there's anything in there that you don't like or it doesn't make any sense. Any questions about what we're here to do, or about these issues that I've raised, or any preliminary thoughts that anybody has? So I would, this is also an opportunity for any members of the public or any who have any things that they want the RAC to think about or focus on as we go forward. If anybody has any thoughts. Andy, go for it.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I have is, I know you've got federal requirements there, but I'm wondering if there's also an opportunity to look at state requirements that are already sort of first in line from a regulatory perspective, especially with pipelines. I know Sarah and I have had this conversation in the past with the 2 site certificates that we have, or the 3 that we have for pipelines. And if there's an opportunity to rely on those agencies, both at the federal and state level, rather than having you guys look at, say, pipeline safety and that sort of thing when it's already happening 2 levels above you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Dugan?
Everyone, yeah, on the federal stuff, I think per the governor's recent executive order, not the most recent one, but the second most recent one is as it relates to the to EFSC and renewable energy specifically. Just for context for other people, we're in a changing policy environment from a federal level on many of these wind and solar sites that are either planned to be constructed or already constructed in the state. And I think it should be I think it's a good effort, and I think it's timely to kind of infer the governor's direction to kind of disentangle the state's requirements with the federal requirements, treat them as separately as possible. This more goes towards maybe it's more in the permitting realm, but like when you're seeking a site certificate, but trying to avoid needing to ask the federal agency for a certain yes or approval of anything. And I'm not seeing that really in these rules that much, but there are several federal references that I feel like we should clean up just to make sure it's clear when is it required from the federal level and when is it, a state requirement. I think the state does have the authority and enough of rules around that we don't really need that much federal input, maybe save for some specific things around nuclear or certain federally recognized species habitat stuff. I'll say from OSEA's perspective, we really like the last bullet, as a entity that is trying to make things as streamlined as possible. And I think despite some of staff's best efforts, EFSC is still seen as somewhat of a regulatory burden in the space. Any ways that we can streamline and while doing the things we need to do, have things clarified and simplified as much as possible is a good effort. And I guess the last thing I'll say, and kind of the perspective I'm bringing into this rack a little bit is, while I don't love the idea, well, I just said that I don't love the idea of adding a ton of new language. I do think there needs to be somewhat of a better delineation of where EFSC and ODO have authority and where that is kind of let to be flexible for the applicant or for the certificate holder. And so I do think I can't think of any specific instances off the top of my head, but I find a lot of times interacting with the department and with EFSC that things are a bit squishier than I'd like them to be, just in terms of, oh, can we do this? I feel like a lot of EFSC meetings everyone's looking at Todd or DOJ folks about like, oh, is this actually in our jurisdiction? And I think some of that being a little bit more clearly outlined within the rules might help everyone kind of walk into the room, into a pre-construction meeting or into a maybe a violation meeting, just understanding where kind of the authority starts and ends, both for ODO staff and for EFSC as a whole. So again, I don't have like specific language coming off the top of my head for that, but that's one focus that we have in this.
So before we turn to Sam, who I also want you to introduce yourself before you say whatever you're going to say. I will say to your point, Dugan, that I am the I don't want to maybe principal advocate for the removal of regulatory cruft, if you will. But we do hear a lot from folks that like, well, this is a burden or whatever. But then when we ask them to actually point stuff out, they're like, well, so the point is well taken, but I would say it is 10 to a million times more effective. And obviously we just got started here, but as we progress, to the extent you can say, this rule language, then, that's what we're here to do. We're here to take a very close look at specific rule language and identify, is it serving a function? Does it make sense? But I'm never afraid or it doesn't bother me to be told like, hey, take a look at this. That's kind of what I enjoy doing. So to the extent you can put some ammunition in or some arrows in your quiver on that, I welcome it. So let's turn to Sam, and then after he goes, and then Sarah, you can make your point.
Hey everyone, my name is Sam Diaz, he, him, his. I'm executive director here at 1000 Friends of Oregon. We're a statewide organization focused on land conservation and development decisions. We have a great communities program, zooms in on housing, transportation, jobs inside our urban growth boundaries, and then outside we work with ranchers and farmers and forest land managers to protect our farms and our forests and watersheds. Appreciate the invitation to come. I think, having been a liaison to a bureau like Bureau of Development Services in the Portland area, I know that some of the barriers are actually that staffing, which I know you mentioned at the beginning, and honestly, some of the technology. And I know I don't want to get the agency in trouble, so to speak, but I think it is helpful for us as a committee to figure out how to make the capacity, the POPs, like whatever the agency needs to function and to actually have review capacity or capacity to show up and help people get into compliance and monitor compliance. So I hope and encourage that to be part of the conversation. And it may not be a formal part of the recommendations from the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, but I think it's really helpful for us and the public just to understand how to support holistically, what the outcomes are that we're after.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to require the department to do things in terms of oversight that we don't have the ability to do. So I completely agree with that take, Sam. Sarah?
I just wanted to tee off of some of Dugan's comments, and because to me, some of the squishiness is more, housed in our standards and in the conditions, right? So that I don't know that will get fixed in the compliance rulemaking, but plug for phase 3, that is the rulemaking. That's what we're calling the rulemaking that will apply to the opening up of all of our standards and really asking the questions. Where is this unclear? Why is it unclear? Why are we asking for all this information outside of the rule through completeness, right? So to me, that's tightening squishy, trying to reduce squishy. But, and this might be the next thing I'm about to say might not fit or be too big of an idea or not a good idea. But I'm wondering, Tom, if we could bring in Division 25 as part of this rulemaking, because Division 25 are mandatory conditions that have to go in every site certificate. And one of the reason I went over there is because one of the things that I think has led to squishiness in a site certificate is because awkwardly, mandatory condition 10 in the rule says that the council has to include as conditions all representations that an applicant has made in their application. And so for a long time, we're like, well, you said this, so we're going to put it in a condition. And then no one said, and how are we going to verify that? And how are they going to prove it? Right. And so anyway, but even if we were able to say there's squishiness that comes through compliance, I mean, to me, your experience, Dugan, would be with the site certificate, right? Like Pine Gate hasn't experienced squishiness necessarily in the compliance rules, right? It's like, well, what did this condition mean? Why am I being asked to do this when that's not what it says? But if like the mandatory conditions could be opened up and everybody was clear on what the base mandatory for all site certificate holders was required, like that would minimize a lot of squishiness. Because we actually put purpose and intent into those, and those go in all site certificates, and we haven't. Anyway, I'll stop talking. But how can you have one without? The rules are they apply to how we enforce, but there's a larger squishiness issue. But that's 5 years away.
Okay, with respect to the scope, I mean that's just what we would do in that particular case is I would just go back to the council and say, hey, we got started on this and we realized we need the scope needs to include, rule language in Division 25 because it wasn't previously brought up when we initiated the rulemaking. And if they agreed, then they would just say, yep, sounds good. And then we would be able to address that as well with this rulemaking. So, and then just to go off of your comments about the standards, we've been leading up to this since I was the day I was hired. Todd pulled me into a room and he said, this is we want to basically do a full revamp of all the rules, and here's how we're going to do it in phase 1 and phase 2, which would all lead up to a series of rulemakings where we'd look at the actual council standards and then identify, like, are we asking for the right stuff? you know, are there things we're always asking for because it's not actually in the rules and should be in there? Are there things we're asking for that shouldn't be in there? Because the information requirements really sort of delineate what the standard is from the council standpoint. And that work is beginning right now. So actually Monday is going to be the first rec for rulemaking for council standards, the organizational expertise and retirement financial assurance standards, which probably not the most interesting for certificate holders, maybe depending on the situation, but we're going to rapidly, start chewing through those. Actually, this upcoming next week, we're going to present to the council the proposed schedule for future rulemakings, and we are going to be going through these standards pretty aggressively over the next 2-3 years. So if you're interested in those and you have particular standards you're interested in, you can reach out to me, and then I will sort of make a note when we get to that standard to reach out to you to see if you'd be interested in being on those racks. And some of you are in the rack for that'll meet on Monday to talk about those first two council standards. Ryan.
Yeah, what would just help me as I go through these rules to prepare comments in the compliance plan section, it references construction as a defined term in Division 1. And I don't know if I just am missing it or Control F is failing me, but I do not see construction as a defined term, which I think would be very valuable to look at in coordination with these rules.
So which rule you're looking at?
So it's 35-026-0048. When you go to 345-001-0010 to look at the defined term construction that this rule references, it's not defined.
Ah.
Yeah, it's in statute 469-300 sub 6. So yeah, incorrect reference to Division 1. It's not in there.
Oh, well, it sort of is. It in that rule, it specifically states construction is as defined in ORS 469-300. So our definition is to say that we're defining it how it's defined in statute.
Okay. Yep.
That's section 12 of Rule 10 in Division 1. So let's see, I'm actually going to pull that up. Oh yeah, so the definition there in statute is construction means work performed on a site, excluding surveying, exploration, or other activities, the cost of which exceeds $250,000. Yeah, I sort of just pasted it in there.
All right, appreciate it.
Which I did not know. I did not know we had a dollar amount on that definition. I've never actually read that. Interesting.
Right. And I think it would be pretty hard because that's like, I mean, most developers spend 250,000 pretty quick doing not very much, but because it's in statute, it would be a hurdle we're not super excited to go over just to change.
Yeah.
If I could
go ahead.
add, yeah, one thing I want to add in there is potentially in terms of new technology and new methods. I know a lot of developers, at least as it relates to solar, are being asked to do pre-seeding on sites years before construction starts, and that does have a relatively large cost. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to, like, say pre-seeding is kind of a survey or a preparation thing that it doesn't actually mean you're starting construction. We get told that to keep weeds down, we should seed in the planting season a year before construction, and the mowing and planting costs can be significant there, but we would not want to say that we've started construction yet because it is truly a pre-construction activity. I don't know if that's currently captured by the rule, but that's one thing I would think about given how much feedback we get from the public and from county weed managers about that.
Okay. Is there a reason why you would be concerned about it being considered pre-construction? Is that because it would trigger certain conditions that you don't want to necessarily have to comply with because it doesn't make sense?
In the case that it would trigger the consideration of it being called construction, I think that's the concern. Not if it's considered, maybe the rules allow for something like that. I haven't looked through everything.
I see.
But I want to make sure that if that is not clear presently, maybe we give that some thought. Of course, we can't change the statute, but if there's a way that those kinds of activities could be considered under surveying or something similar to it,
I see. Okay. That's definitely, I mean, that's the sort of thing we can look at. And truthfully, one of the functions of the RAC can certainly be identifying potential legislative concepts where we say, man, this doesn't make any sense, but we have to do it because the statute, that could potentially be something where we would then either encourage a RAC member to submit a legislative concept, or in some cases, the department would potentially submit a legislative concept to remedy sort of something that we've identified as a problem. So that's sort of outside the scope of what we would submit to council and get changed in rules. But I mean, if we're going to put all this brain juice on looking at these rules and trying to identify what makes sense and what needs improvement, it sort of all ties back to the statutory framework, and we can, but that's, it's not perfect either. So to the extent we identify issues, we should make a note of those and bring those up as well. All right. Any other good discussion so far, guys and gals? Okay. So, and just to be clear, as a public meeting, so we always provide an opportunity for public comment to the extent there's any non-REC members present who have any thoughts they want to add to our discussion, which I find we don't normally see, but sometimes you've got members. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Let's talk about next steps and wrap this up. So I anticipate having the next meeting in roughly a month, so like mid-January. I'll send out a poll, just like I did for this meeting, with 5 or 6, times. This is the toughest one to schedule time-wise. This was only 45 minutes. I would anticipate that our next meeting would be potentially longer. Sometimes the RAC's a lot more engaged and things go a lot longer than I think, but I'll probably schedule it for 90 minutes again as well. And then if we go over, we would just push it out to another RAC meeting. That would be fine. I used to schedule them for 3 hours, but I don't think I've ever been in a 3-hour RAC where I felt like by the end of that 3 hours, people were engaged and things were making good use of everybody's time. I tend to like the shorter RACs. It's just how long my brain can handle things. Okay, so in the next week or two, ideally, it would be great if you guys could submit any additional concerns or ideas along the lines of what has already been brought up. I took a note of what everybody said, but to the extent you maybe want to flesh your ideas out a little more, as you look at the rules with respect to things that were raised today or not raised today, as the more specific you are, the better. But even regardless of how specific your idea is, if you have any thoughts or concerns about the rules or what we should accomplish with this RAC, submit them to me, and then I will, or you can just reply all to the poll invitation that you already got, and that will send your thoughts out to the whole RAC, because it should be a collaborative effort, and everybody should be made aware of these thoughts and concerns. But I'll then sort of tabulate those and then combine them with our own internal thoughts and try to present a more defined sort of list of ideas and suggestions, and based on what we get, we'll sort of determine the nature of what the next RAC meeting will look like. I don't anticipate this RAC being 2 years long with 30 meetings. We could potentially go through these issues relatively quickly. I don't think there's not a ton of rule language. We have, quite a few thoughts and ideas about what we want to change, but I anticipate us wrapping this up within the next, 6 months, no more than maybe 3 or 4 more meetings. If subject to how things go. So we'll be flexible, but that's just sort of to the extent forecasting will help you. I would probably plan for about 3 or 4 more 90-minute sessions. And then if we find that things are a lot more meaty or require more meeting time, we may schedule more or longer RAC meetings, but that's just my prediction at this point. Does anybody have any questions about the RAC or next steps? I guess I will turn to the last slide here. My name again is Tom Jackman, and you can see my email address there. So feel free to reach out to me with any questions if they occur to you between now and the next RAC meeting, and just look out for the next poll. So with that, I will let everybody go. And thanks for coming.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tom.
Tom.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.